There's been a pretty gnarly turn of events in the whole microplastic saga, and to illustrate just how much of a complete upending 180 this could turn out to be, I want to just briefly mention one of my favorite stories from the field of astronomy, which this whole thing reminds me of very much. In 1998, the Australian Parkes Radio Telescope picked up a series of fast radio bursts, or FRBs for short. The signals that they found were new and unique and mysterious, and the team named them peritons. This was a real major moment when SETI was a big force in the pop culture, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was just big craze. You had these screensavers you could download that would analyze data in like a cool crowdsourced science campaign that helped with the search for aliens, and it would check out these interesting signals while your machine was idle. And these peritons they found in Australia were certainly interesting signals. They had all the hallmark signs of messages sent from an intelligent species, and it was very exciting. Fortunately, the Parkes laboratory was just equipped with a device that filtered out and identified signals that were not coming from space. And this eventually led the team to discover the true origin of the signals that they'd found. This and the fact that the signals were all coming to them around the hours of lunchtime. So the researchers looked at every possible frequency they could think of until they finally matched up the signals to known phenomenon and discovered soon after that what they thought were messages from mysterious deep space creatures with possible intelligent designs and information and cool, fascinating, like maybe they were sending us like the latest issues of their alien comic books, were all just coming from the microwave in the break room. Specifically, the signal was coming from the microwave radiation that escaped from the microwave when someone opened the door before it was done cooking. And in that fraction of a second, the signal that they found was leaking out. Not aliens, just Herb heating up his chicken salad again. And it took 17 years to solve this because it wasn't finally figured out until 2015. It wasn't like someone just went right next door and was like, oh, yeah, just the microwave. Someone may have spent their entire career figuring this out. Microplastics may go down in history right next to the story of the Parkes Radio Telescope. I'll be honest, I was buying the hype. I was really here for it. For a minute there, I was very much behind the idea that microplastics were going to turn out to be the thing that took down modern society. They were going to be the lead pipes of the Roman Empire. They were going to send us into a new apocalyptic stone age. We were picking up microplastics from all corners of the earth, in our most remote areas that we never even visited or couldn't access, and even finding them inside of ourselves, in our brains and in our balls. That's a true story, and I did a video on it. But yeah, fortunately, there's a big new reason why we might totally be in the clear now. And that's because a lot of the microplastics we're picking up from the craziest parts of our environment, like the Antarctic ice core samples from prehistoric ages, etc. Well, scientists might be finding all of these microplastics everywhere because of the gloves that they're wearing in the lab. Before we go over the details of this and assemble this new puzzle as if out of Legos, do please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can learn along with me about the state of the world and the tech and science and society that make it up with you right in the middle. A new paper from researchers at the University of Michigan details the microplastics problem. They were actually running a different experiment to measure the amount of microplastics in the atmosphere when they got a bit derailed. Several teams across departments of chemistry, statistics, and climate and space sciences engineering were all sifting through the air above the state of Michigan to get in on the microplastics craze and see just how many of these things are floating around out there. They did this in a similar way to how people in Little House on the Prairie times would collect wild yeast from the air, which I learned about during my bread making phase that I only got into after everyone else stopped. And collecting wild yeast from the air is one of those human endeavors that just immediately hits you like how the f*** did anyone figure this out? Were you just flying around? You just catch it? What? Just catch it? You make things from it? Like some of the foods we make that are actually poisonous during part of the process? Who stopped during that step and died, and everyone else was just yeah, just needs a little more time in the barrel. Okay. We'll try it again in a week or two. Hansel and many of our friends died to give us this delicious rhubarb pie. If you didn't know, rhubarb leaves are poisonous. We had one of those growing in the house where I grew up. Just a big old rhubarb plant. Tree. bush, rhubarb foliage, rhubarbidendrum? I don't know. But the results the team got back were immediately suspicious to at least the lead researcher, because there were thousands of times more microplastics than what they expected to find in the atmosphere. Instead of just accepting the results and publishing research about insane levels of microplastics in the Michigan air, they put in their due diligence and went about looking for something that could have skewed the results. And they literally found that thing in their own two hands. The kind of gloves they were using for the initial experiment were nitrile gloves, a common synthetic lab glove. The team soon discovered that the stearate coating from their gloves gives off particles that look exactly like microplastics. Stearates are a fatty acid from animal fats that have many uses, but one of them is to make lubricants, like the coating on lab gloves that keeps them from sticking to the manufacturing molds that make them, and also from sticking to each other. This is where the Michigan research took a pretty major turn, because they realized that if this was happening to them, then it must be happening to everybody else looking into the prevalence of microplastics in the world. From here, they designed an experiment that examined 7 different types of gloves used in the lab and how much of their leakage was really to blame for some of the microplastic findings in recent years. What they discovered was 2,000 false positives per square millimeter of area. So that's kind of a lot. The Michigan team set up conditions to mimic just regular laboratory handling and procedures the way you would do if you were just going about an experiment. And they found that any time that researchers are touching samples or equipment that's going to hold samples with their gloved hands, there is a potential contamination risk. So it's extremely likely that our conclusions about the prevalence of microplastics being absolutely everywhere are maybe a bit skewed. Things that this doesn't mean, though. It doesn't mean that microplastics are not a problem. That was a lot of negatives. Microplastics are still a problem. They're not the end of the Roman Empire for us, though. As the social media trend pointed out, as a man, I think about the Roman Empire at least once a day. Where's my SPQR? There it is. Ah, look at that. So sparkly. So shiny. I hope that's not made of lead. Oh, man. Lead poisoning wasn't the sole cause of the fall of the Roman Empire, but it's theorized to have been a major factor. And not just because the plumbing was made of lead, and the word plumbing itself comes from the Latin for lead, plumbum or plumbarius, a lead worker or plumber. Plumbarius. The plumbarius comes to the door. Does he fix the plumbing, or is this the first ancient Roman adult video?
Don't be fatuous, Jeffrey.
Sadly, the lead that they used in those days was airborne due to extensive metal mining operations. A 2025 study found that during the peak of the Roman Empire, the amount of atmospheric lead pollution was lowering IQs by 2.5 to 3 percentage points. When's that Idiocracy prequel coming? Idiocracy. Beware the plumbers of March. Idiocracy. Plumbarius Caesar. Plastics and their numerous chemical configurations do cause a lot of problems that we know about, and they are in everything. Everything is made of plastic. I'm made of plastic right now. And pieces of that plastic do get into many places that they shouldn't be in a very large volume. In the words of the lead researcher from the Michigan study, quote, "As microplastics researchers looking for microplastics in the environment, we're searching for the needle in the haystack, but there really shouldn't be a needle to begin with." There's a new study being reported on right now that one particular chemical in plastics that's designed to make devices more flexible has contributed to 74,000 newborn deaths and just under 2 million preterm births in just 1 year in 2018, which was 8% of all preterm births in that year. And the study authors point out that simply replacing this one chemical is unlikely to really do much at all, because manufacturers will just substitute another one that's just as likely to contribute to terrible health outcomes. There are endless plastic components out there that are ready to be thrown into the mix, and we won't have time to study their effects on the human body before they're just in everything that we touch. It's a really tough race against developing the infrastructure that we all admittedly need and that makes life better in a great many ways, but that are definitely full of drawbacks in a lot of other ways. I feel like there needs to be a big coordinated effort that comes from the government in like a top-down fashion in order to categorize and regulate these things. But the unchecked, laissez-faire, pro-oligarchy peeps love to keep telling me that big government is going to lead to terrible situations where we have plastic components that kill our children, and no, wait, that's happening right now. That's the trusting companies and billionaires thing instead. Huh. The great thing about the Michigan team study is that it didn't just stop with identifying the problem, it gave us some really good recommendations for moving forward, and that these should solve the problem of contamination, and that's great. They discovered that a certain type of glove, a clean room glove, is the best kind of glove to wear when looking for microplastics because they don't have the stearate coatings and they don't give off the false positives. So they've also identified this whole thing, which is some people might scoff at, but this is not a small thing. It means now we know that there's been a major issue in this area of research, and now we can eliminate it altogether and get better science. One way to do that, they point out, is to recruit more chemistry into the process. Because learning how to better identify stearates in samples, which are now pretty much identical through laboratory observation, well, that would make it so that one could wear whatever gloves they wanted to, and we could get filtered results that were 100% accurate. I think that too many people look at this kind of thing as just a really bad thing. Like a really bad thing. Sort of like, aha, the scientists got this one wrong. And I don't really know why, because there's a real tendency to jump to like a gotcha type of situation. And for me, there might be some mixed feelings in there, but overall this is a really, really good thing. Advancing our understanding of any aspect of the world is always a good thing, even if it comes at the expense of our own egos or what we thought that we knew. This is a kind of skill of changing minds that we desperately need to cultivate more of in society, where we just learn to relax and follow the evidence. My personal mixed feelings come in the area of doomerism, because I almost feel a little disappointed that the threat of microplastics probably isn't really that big of a deal. One thing that brings up for me is the fact that I can still get caught up in the media hype, because headlines about microplastic were just everywhere since we learned about how tiny plastics were also everywhere. And the media coverage has always been extremely alarmist about this. But the news is always either alarmist or unrealistically hopeful. There's hardly an in-between. But if you're interested in my examination into why that is and what particular emotions make people click or view content online and how that can be manipulated by news and content outlets, I've done a number of related videos about that. Like this most recent one about the phenomenon of collective narcissism and why I think that most of us never really left high school, at least in our hearts. But yeah, it turns out that we're all probably too riled up about microplastics. There are very likely much less of them than we previously thought, and they probably aren't turning us into big plastic Tupperware people. Except that's exactly what I would say if I were a big plastic Tupperware person. I have been finding it weird lately that I can now disassemble and reassemble myself into various configurations. And when I give someone a hug these days, I seal them in for freshness. I don't know, you decide. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to do some good out there in your own little sphere of the world. Whether that be picking up microplastics out of your local water supply, or maybe traveling back in time to warn the Romans about their lead problem. Plumbarius. The Plumbarius comes to the door.